We're joined now by retired Air Vice-Marshal Sean Bell. Sean, first of all, why do we think this announcement has been made today? What about the timing?
Jane, yeah, 6 months into the war, I think the tide has turned and President Putin's forces have been having invaded, have now been pushed back. The Russian army has been badly mauled and is in a very poor state. They desperately need more people. And as a result, they've tried putting in mercenaries to try and bolster their numbers. They're relatively small numbers and their battlefield experience has not been good. They've fled as soon as they've come under close contact. So they desperately need more soldiers. So they've looked at this partial mobilisation. It's also the timing-wise that the UN Security Council is about to meet, and President Putin's always used that as an opportunity for a bit of sabre rattling.
And so what has been announced? We're looking at the map of the current area with most of the fighting. What difference is he hoping this is going to make?
Yeah, there are a couple of things that, one of which is the announcement of referendums, and we've sort of expected that for some time. They obviously did that, and Russia did that in Crimea. The first area is in the Donbass region here. Clinically, that there is, the Russians do not own the whole of the Donbass. And actually, if you're going to run some sort of referendum, you actually need to be able to talk to the people. Most of the people have fled that area. The only people in there are the Russian separatists. So it's very difficult to see how you could have a meaningful referendum there. If we look across at the referendum for Kherson and across at Zaporizhia, very different nature of most of the population is still there. But actually, the population of Kherson has been very, very resistant to the Russians, and it's almost impossible to see how they would accept the Russians there. So in reality, there would be no credible referendum there. The other thing that's been announced is this mobilisation. In context, when the Russians invaded Ukraine, they used about 190,000 soldiers. That's woefully inadequate from a military perspective for a country, to invade a country of 44 million people and the second largest country in the world. And it was pretty evident they expected just to walk in and not have to fight. Let's put that into context. The Russian army itself is only 280,000 strong. They've also got another 40,000, which is 400,000, the Russian internal protection force. So in context, what Defence Minister Shoigu has just recently announced of 300,000 extra reservists is about 20,000 more than the regular army. So it's not an insignificant number. It's the first time that actually Russia's mobilised since the Second World War. So that's significant. But in context, 300,000 looks a big number, but in reality, Russia could draw on up to 2 million reservists who've served within the military in the last 5 years. And actually, if you went even further, any Russians who've served in the military at any time, you're into 25 million. So numbers, but from a military perspective, none of these people, these reservists, are going to be current. None of them are going to be competent or trained. And the danger is the battlefield is the wrong place to be learning how to fight a war. And it could be very damaging. And certainly the Western analysts do not believe this will significantly change the tide of the war in Ukraine.
And the nuclear threat, which he reiterated today, he's blaming the West, saying that they are the ones threatening, but he is the one who's talking about it.
Yeah, we've got to be very careful, I think. Let's take the context of this to start with. First of all, Putin's plan hasn't worked. His army's mauled. The hardliners at home will not see failure as an option, and history suggests that when Russia's army has failed, that sometimes their enemies capitalise and actually invade Russia itself. So this is as much, these announcements, as much to counter domestic issues as they are international. There's two parts to his announcement that we need to break out, one of which is he talked about Russia having better weapons than the West. What he actually means there, I believe, is talking about Russia has deployed into Ukraine weapons such as the hypersonic missiles. That is shown here underneath the fast jet. That is something the West has not deployed into Ukraine.
It doesn't mean we don't have them, just haven't used them.
No, it just means we haven't used them. But the fact remains is that the Western weapons have proved the critical advantage for Ukraine. So that is a demonstration. But turning to the nuclear question, any discussion on nuclear weapons, for anybody, it's unsettling. But when you look at the words that President Putin used, nothing has changed. He talks about they would only be used if the territorial integrity of Russia was compromised. And that is as much a threat to the West as it is to demonstrate to his own domestic audience that whilst they may not have been doing well on the battlefield, they are still incredibly strong. The challenge ultimately, though, is Putin is in a corner and we need to provide an off-ramp for him. It feels like the time for diplomacy is fast arriving. There'll be some horrible compromises that would have to be made, but ultimately you need to find a way of ending this war. Otherwise, we end up the grave risk that Putin's misadventure becomes a global catastrophe.
Sean, thanks very much.